Right. Well, I'll do my intro. This is the first intro I've ever written. So, you know, I need everybody to clap for me because I'm very good, obviously. Right. So, with all the recent attention in the media the war in Ukraine is getting, now is a better time than ever to learn about the threat of imperialism and what it does to countries on what is known as the imperial periphery. Our guest today, Lina, will be joining us to talk about how we could do more to be aware of how the countries we live in the imperial core strangle the growth and freedom of those not inside it. Gang, what do we know about the phrases imperial core and imperial periphery? We talk about it a lot already. You already know. Both of you.
I mean, you're asking me to talk about it?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't sure if this was part of your intro.
Are you talking to chat or what's going on right now?
No, I'm talking. No, when I say, well, I did say gang. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was stupid.
Yeah. I didn't know if it was like, like just a rhetorical question.
We're in a gang. We're in a gang.
Yeah.
What do you know about the imperial core, the imperial periphery?
Yeah, well, I think it's I've only really kind of been introduced to the concept recently, and I think it's good because like a lot of people use terms like the global south or like even like like third world countries and stuff like that, but when you actually look into the history of a lot of those terms, they're kind of bullshit, and they like they also kind of I don't think they are as black and white as like as it seems. Like, yeah, it's really they're probably just like messy terms that don't really kind of like give us a really good idea. Whereas the imperial core is kind of more like, I think it refers better to like countries in the imperial core are like America, England, and even like Australia and New Zealand and stuff are definitely imperial core, whereas the periphery are those countries outside of the core, usually countries that are kind of I would say that there is like some level of like the core is generally pushing out on the periphery in some way, whether it's like for like taking in like resources or kind of expanding the influence of capital and capitalism and things like that. There's probably a much more concise way of saying it though. But I would say think of the imperial core as well, for me, how I think of it is the network of states that kind of make up, that I guess set the hegemony of capitalism.
Yeah. I think that's pretty spot on.
Yeah, she would have a really more concise, way more better and concise way of
saying
it.
You're pretty spot on.
No, best.
No, you're pretty spot on. Like I would say, like what you were saying about the global south is a very poor term to use because at the end of the day, like Australia and New Zealand, like you say, they're part of the imperial core and they are technically in the global south, so it doesn't actually include it does actually include those countries. And as well, calling countries third world countries is incredibly problematic for like several reasons. At what point, like, why is there a ranking? And generally speaking, it's because of the fact that the countries that are in the imperial core are white majority and they are oppressing those countries, and so like the ranking is white supremacist in nature. And the white supremacy upholds that imperialism as well.
Well,
but should we bring
before we get too deep into it, and I want to bring our guest on, but I also have a note from Sophie, so maybe we'll bring our guest on and I can read that with our guest.
Well, I think Sophie, does she want to? I think she might have wanted you to show the map first, just before we bring Lina in, because like there's a map to bring in and stuff. I don't know, actually. I think maybe we could do that.
Okay, let's bring Lina in then. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do that.
I'll do it.
All right. So dragging Lina in right now.
Hey Lina, what's going on?
Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello. I'm Lina. Hi.
Hi.
Hey,
welcome to the
Lina.
show. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. So imperialism. Let's get into it. I think that it's been a thing that a lot of people have been talking about, especially with regards to Ukraine lately and Ukraine and Russia. but it seems, at least the conversations that I've had on my stream have been like pretty revealing for, you know, how much so many people don't know about these topics, yet we do talk about them quite a bit. But before we jump too hard into the deep end on this, did you want to quickly introduce yourself to the community so we all get to know you a little better?
Hi, I'm Lina. I'm just sort of a Twitter person. I grew up in Palestine, and most of what I do, I'm an IRL activist for the most part, and most of what I do is related to that, but that also brings in like a quite detailed understanding of imperialism and sort of how those dynamics play out.
That's dope. That's very dope. Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, you obviously have a wealth of knowledge and experience that you're drawing from. I'm just a white girl in America who grew up in the Midwest. So that's my extent. That's how much experience I've had with imperialism, and that I am, you know, in the imperialism. I'm more of the imperialist, I guess, if you could think of it, which does lend me a certain perspective, but it's not all that educated. So I'm very glad that you were able to join us and talk to us about this. Yeah, so we have a note from Sophie that I don't know if we should read now, but I also, where host, where do you think we should start with this conversation? To piece through this.
A little. What have you guys gone over so far?
Nothing really. So like we just started talking about imperialism, and I was thinking about reading, because in the notes Sophie wrote this long paragraph, or this long like little kind of an essay, which I think is really great to like set the groundwork. So maybe we should read through that. But I think what a great place to start is to discuss you know, kind of like what imperialism is. And I know it sounds like a very silly question, but I don't think it's all that silly of a question, especially since it seems like people that even might have a decent grasp on imperialism, when it comes down to it, there are certain situations that are tricky for them because it kind of tests their understanding of it. Like, I think that a lot of us can understand very imperialist things. We can see that, okay, that's imperialism. But I think, especially with the Russia-Ukraine situation right now, it seems like a lot of people are trying to apply these what they felt like was imperialism to this, and they're like, no, it's not imperialism if America shows up and tries to defend Ukraine against Russia. And it that's
RTP. Maybe we should talk about that in a second, but I think maybe is it cool if we start with the note from Sophie to kind of go over everything?
I'll read that then.
Because I think that's like a kind of like
idea.
It's like it seems like it's like a little kind of like brief overview, and then we can go back and we can kind of like talk about everything through there. And there's like a little map in there that I think will be really good bring up. But yeah, also while we do that, I'm just gonna duck out and check on my cat real quick.
Little kid. Okay, so I'll go ahead and read this because Sophie couldn't be here with us today, chat, because Sophie's sick with the Rona, unfortunately. So I'm gonna read this ahead for everyone. Hey everyone, really sad I couldn't be around for this one, but I have COVID. I have a lot to say about imperialism, but just to add my bit here, it's important to remember imperialism isn't just boots on the ground, but media, border control, policy, and economics. America floods markets around the world with cotton and wheat that they don't need, completely crashing their domestic markets and forcing them to be dependent on this American foreign aid. Right now, obviously sanctions are on everyone's minds, but it's important to remember that America nominally helping by giving countries stuff can be just as much of a tool of control as taking things away. The freedom in the free market is the freedom afforded to the most important party, the winner in every deal, and that winner is America and its allies, which is why America is so determined to force the free market on every country in the world, because joining the free market means American domination. All right, I think I just want to take a moment to let that sink in for everyone before I move on to the next part. Because I think, the discussions we've been having, at least on my stream, about like, you know, is it imperialism if America is defending a helpless country against an evil invader, which is like the way that people are thinking of it. I think that this hopefully addresses those concerns. That I honestly, as long as America is what it is, America, that it's swooping in to try to maintain, how do I put it?
Hegemony.
Yeah, it's hegemony, right? It's this benevolence, this so-called benevolence that is actually not truly benevolence, because if it was truly benevolence, we would see America being extremely different than it is, and also we would see other countries, not just this particular country, being assisted. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the Ukraine-Russia stuff because I kind of want to. Maybe if we have time, we can do that. But it's just one of those examples of, I think, a confusion that I've been noticing a lot of people have. But I really appreciate this paragraph because I think hopefully it clears it up for a lot of people.
People confused about the Ukraine-Russia conflict? Never. I've not seen any of that.
People, the way a lot of people imagine imperialism is as always this sort of boots on the ground direct thing, and it's really not imperial. And I'll get more into this later, but imperialism's primarily an economic relation.
Okay.
Like,
yeah,
it's mostly about, at least in the modern day, especially, it's about the relationship between the core and the periphery and how capital flows between them.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great way of putting it. Okay, let's get to the next part. Countries in the imperial core benefited from their natural resources, but countries in the periphery have their natural resources extracted and plundered by imperialist corporations. Countries in the imperial core grew richer through the growth of the manufacturing sector, industrialization, but manufacturing in the imperial periphery only continues to benefit the imperial core. The reason that everything we use is made by imperial periphery countries today is that our manufacturing boom led to our overcapacity in the global market, which made manufacturing products dirt cheap, which forced other countries to offer competitively low prices for the same goods. And now we've transitioned to a service sector economy and we use goods made by people in the imperial periphery. This is a lot to imagine. Chat, are we hanging on so far? I want to check in with chat real quick.
I do want to note one thing. The export of capital from the core to the periphery is also to allow the periphery to transition away from the feudal mode of production. Like, that's part of it.
Transition away from the feudal mode of production to a capitalist one?
Yes, this is has been a huge thing in a lot of the kind of imperialism, Pacific imperialism from New Zealand and Australia out to all the islands and stuff. Basically expanding capitalism in the Pacific has meant moving from traditional island ways of life to basically introducing capitalism sort of thing. So they will go over there and they will set up things like bring in new like technology, resources, and all this kind of stuff. But it's for it's like one island, Banaba, off the coast of Kiribati, that they basically they brought over all these cool things. Like they set up all these businesses there, all focused on extraction of like phosphate and things like that. And everyone was really excited. They're like, yeah, all these big machines, and like our island is finally doing something. And then they just totally stripped all the phosphate out of the island and like basically destroyed the island. Turn the island into an extraction project. And it's this thing where it's like, yeah, the island was developed, in one way, but at what cost, There's a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, super in the chat says it's never to enable self-sufficiency, but to develop dependency.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
So destroying other smaller, there's a lot of stuff in the islands where it'll be like, they'll change the agricultural focus from creating food and things that sustain the island over to things that can be exported. So then also the island has to depend on, trade from other areas to cover their basic needs and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay.
Anyway.
Thank you, Lina. That was a good note. Okay, so The imperial core today, we'll move on, chat. The imperial core today is a product of hundreds of years of colonialism, followed by the enforcement of free market capitalism, which let the richest countries, rich by stealing everyone else's wealth, get even richer. And we can see where the imperial core is very clearly if we look at all the harshest borders in the world. Inside the imperial core is 14% of the population, but 73% of the world's income. Here's a neat map. So this map is something that we've looked at before in this stream. And I think it's really helpful for giving a visual to something that sometimes it can feel like we're being super abstract, like imperial core, imperial periphery. It's like, what does that even mean? This is what it looks like. I like, and yeah, so you can see that there's little bits of, you can't avoid entire continents. There are still like pieces of, this is why we can't, when people say global north, global south, I don't think that really, for a lot of people, I think north and south, and like sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. And so, yeah, this is what the imperial core looks like. And this is why I think that's probably the best way to describe it, because we're just cutting to the chase. Like, who are the imperialists and who are the victims of imperialism? Really?
Yeah. And I think it's really good that they have the specified sort of like aggressive fronts. So you have like the red in between the USA and Mexico.
This is an aggressive border.
Have the, that's right,
the imperial core from the imperial periphery, and then is here. That's interesting.
They've got all that lettered, so yeah, you could kind of see where all the hard borders are and stuff. And like that first one that they talk about is the demilitarized zone in Korea. Yeah, very, very important.
Yeah,
I'd also like to note
to this
that
go on.
Oh, go ahead.
I'd like to note that with regard to this map, especially I'm going to talk about the EU, a lot of nations that are in the EU aren't even really part of the core. The EU is a financial instrument that exists to guarantee expanded markets for German and French products, for the most part. Especially like Greece. Look at what happened to Greece after the Greek financial crisis. Forced to accept austerity and a lot of IMF loans, which are an instrument of financial capital used to exert control over the Greek economy. This is the case for a lot of Eastern Europe. Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Croatia. A lot of these countries are also cheap labor sources.
So what would you call a place like Greece then? Would that...
either periphery or semi-periphery, which is another distinction. Probably not semi-periphery, actually. It would be a periphery country.
This is why it was such an interesting thing in the UK when Brexit came around, and why no one fucking knew what the fuck they were voting for, because obviously that kind of information isn't going to be available to the electorate, because as far as they're concerned, the EU is just people that make their bananas bendy or some shit. Do you know what I mean? Like they get different types of bananas and stuff.
What? Their bananas?
Yeah. It was some absurd shit, and like they were, and a lot of people just thought, because like Jeremy Corbyn was is quite known for being pro Brexit. He's actually pro Brexit, and of course Brexit under a Corbyn-led government would have been fine, but of course Brexit under Tory rule is not going so well. So yeah, just a little side note there. My apologies. Please continue.
All right, so that was a really interesting note. Thank you, Lina. I had no idea. So there's these, because I guess that does make sense, because sometimes the relationship, like you'll see that although we do talk about these divisions, we do live in like the real world where there sometimes aren't such clear-cut divisions, and that's like a really interesting point. That's if I can try to relay it to make sure I get it right. You're saying that some countries have some function as imperial core in that they still receive the somewhat of a protective status, because they are so coveted by other imperial core countries as markets, but in actuality they are also thoroughly exploited and absolutely dependent upon imperial core countries.
Yes, we would refer to these as the semi-periphery. Sometimes it depends.
Got it.
Semi-periphery nations are ones that are like developing as opposed to undeveloped, and they get a lot of focus and attention for very good reason. These would include like Russia, China, India, uh, not South Korea much anymore, Iran, Greece, much of Eastern Europe, Brazil, South Africa, Argentina, Mexico, those kinds of nations
Yeah.
Interesting.
that exert a bit more power. They aren't just necessarily pushed around, but they're also like forced into these arrangements, either with or against the periphery for some particular reason.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The IMF is a major arm of imperialism. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's interesting. Because, you know, like some people will say that, you know, like the IMF is imperialism, but then they will say that, you know, like the Belt and Road Initiative is also imperialism. Whereas I think that there's like, you know, like, I don't think if you really look at them side by side, I don't think it's the same kind of thing when you consider like the IMF, like a lot of the power of that, you know, a lot of the imperialism isn't from the loans. Well, it isn't from the you know, like the money that they're giving them or whatever like that. It's the debt afterwards, and it's, you know, the kind of like the leaning on repayments of that debt. Whereas you know, the Belt and Road Initiative is a lot more. I think the like I don't like the actual like arrangement, the loan arrangement and stuff like that is a lot less aggressive and things. So I would like I mean. I think there's probably someone out there that is a lot more like kind of equipped to talk about the ins and outs of that. But from my understanding, the Belt and Road Initiative seems like far, far preferable to the IMF. And like, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, Lina, do you know any more about that?
Any more about, sorry.
Belt and Road. I don't know anything about this topic for the record.
BRI is mostly a way to guarantee overland and sea routes for to transport Chinese goods between China and Western Europe, mostly.
Yeah. So they're like building infrastructure along the way, sort of thing like that. Whereas like so a lot of these like, you know, like places are like, hey, you know, like this is a mutually beneficial arrangement or whatever like that. So it's like they're kind of not really like, you know, whereas like the IMF is like, we'll help you build infrastructure, but well, we'll give you the money to build infrastructure and that, but you kind of owe us for, you know, like whatever. Whereas yeah, my understanding is like a lot of these nations are like instead going towards China and being like, actually, yeah, you know, like this will benefit us both if we build infrastructure together without like these like aggressive loans and stuff. But
China is also in the semi-periphery. It's moving. China's a state in transition, very much so.
All right. I'm gonna read the last part.
Unelectable airwaves is brought up a little point. IMF loans dictate the pace of privatization. Don't think BRI does the same.
Belt and Road
Initiative. I think
yeah, no. Right. BRI is mostly to build infrastructure. For movement of goods.
Yeah, but it seemed like a lot of people, well, like I think Twitter people be like, you know, like you think the IMF is, you know, is imperialism. What about China and the Belt and Road Initiative? Is like,
it's a lot of. We live in the American propaganda sphere. We're going to hear so much more about more minor stuff that our imperial enemies do.
Especially like all the BRI stuff throughout Africa and stuff, you know, like there's like a lot of these people being like, oh, China are trying to take over Africa, and you know the BRI thing is like their backdoor, and it's like, no, they're just like, I don't think that's it at all. Like, but, anyway, I mean, like if we spend too much time talking about all the wild things we hear in Western media, we'll probably be here all day. So should we move along?
Let me read this last paragraph. Discussion of from Sophie. In discussion of Ukraine, it's worth acknowledging that EU membership and other factors is something that can allow countries to move from the periphery to the core, and shows how it is still a messy distinction, but for the most part, this map shows us where the lines are drawn. No more imperialist wars, no more but class war. Okay, I'm going back to lie down. So that's the end.
Thank you.
And this is kind of
so that was a note from Sophie.
Lina, what you were discussing, I think Sophie kind of touches on it. This like EU membership allowing countries to be on that like transition between periphery and core, or at least Sophie's kind of alluding to a messiness of the distinctions, and like you were saying, which I found very interesting.
I'd actually like to counter this. I
Ooh.
can't think of a country that has been moved from the periphery to the core after joining the EU. I think the
Yeah.
purpose of trying to get Ukraine into the European Union is to treat it much like Poland and Bulgaria are
Hmm.
already treated, as a source of
Mm.
cheap labor and for markets for German and French goods.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Do you think
I
it's
think you're
like maybe
absolutely spot on.
like I can see like the idea of moving from the periphery to the core being a promise made by the EU. Like I think that that is you know like when we're looking at the you know what is sold to people as the benefits of joining the EU, I can definitely see that as a thing. But that's interesting that nobody has shifted, you know, because it's kind of like that's one of the you know, like the whole thing is like, you know, come join the EU, come sit at our table, you know,
Hmm.
reap the benefits. But yeah, interesting that you said that no one has actually shifted that position.
Well, it's interesting if you think of like descriptions of imperialism as the exportation of capitalism, because considering
Mm,
that definition, it is very akin to like saying, "Hey, if you simply toe the line and like hang out with us and agree with us, then you're going to become a Jeff Bezos one day or something." This type of pipe dream that's given to workers to keep them on the hook and to sell them this illusion of becoming one of the big dogs. I don't know. I can see parallels between that type of that type of culture created out of capitalism being transformed into this one where you're selling countries on a dream of becoming one of the big bad bullies. You know.
mm.
Pretty much, yeah. This is what happened to Japan and Korea after the
Mm.
Second World War.
Oh yeah.
Economic. Actually, no, I don't think that term applies. But a lot of them, like Japan's basically a one-party state, right? Like there is one party
Yeah,
that controls most of the parliament, and that
Yeah.
party has been in power for decades, and it is the only political force, and it enforces this mode of capitalism that was imported from the US. South Korea, even more so. South Korea makes it, the South Korean government makes it illegal to support a lot of left wing causes, and it's mainly used as a US military base, even
Hmm.
though it's like on paper economically prosperous.
Hmm.
yeah. I've actually heard that from a few Korean people I've seen on Twitter about how like they're absolutely sort of sick to death of the fucking the attempted westernization of loads of shit in Korea and stuff, and it's like there's a whole like culture erasure that happened because of the war and stuff. Yeah, and they just like you say, just like literally like use it as a front for North Korea, you know,
Yeah.
to sort
What
of like
what do you
quote unquote
think
defend.
would happen to South Korea and Japan today if they said, "Okay, we want your US military bases out"? Would they be the economically prosperous powers they are
Mm,
today?
yeah.
No,
Would
yeah,
they
yeah,
continue to hold that position?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's
Hmm.
like,
That's it.
yeah. Oh, yeah, we got Mel saying, yeah, Korea is an occupied state by the US. Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's like, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of, I mean, it's not even like miseducation. It's just like a total lack of education about, yeah, in general, just, you know, the Korean Peninsula and its history and, yeah, like, yeah, politics and stuff. And all you know like just like nobody in the west knows what the fuck they're talking about in regards to that, you know. It's like good Korea and bad Korea, you know. It's like yeah. And I mean it's like when you look at the media, you look at all the movies and all the kind of gags and stuff like that, it's like you know like yeah, people have no idea. They don't know what America did to Korea. It's completely fucked.
And this is why I
Oh
Yeah.
god,
always
it's
feel
so
like
fucked.
this is why I'm
Mm.
always very like insecure to like discuss any of this stuff, and I always try to like keep my mouth shut, because as much as I feel like sometimes I have these ideas about how the rest of the world works, I have to remember like from this conversation alone, I'm already getting blown away with so much of the knowledge that y'all are talking about, that Lina's bringing to the table, and it just
Mm.
reminds me of how little I do know about this stuff, and also how much confidence I as an American have in the knowledge that I think I have. Like American propaganda is lended Americans this idea that we understand what the fuck is going on in the rest of the world, and if it's whatever our American propaganda has told us, and it's very much not accurate, and but it does lend
Yeah.
that sense of false security. Um,
Mm.
So, you know,
Yeah.
be okay saying
Yeah.
be okay admitting to yourself, chat, that you don't know a lot of things. So those of you who know more, that's great. That's awesome. You're wonderful. Keep it up. But I know a lot of my viewers are probably very similar to me in that we're still learning, and so I hope that this is so far it is an informative episode for you, and will continue to be so. So yeah, imagine knowing things.
Yes.
Cringe. It's very cringe.
Don't be.
Yeah.
That's it. Don't be
I mean-
afraid of being cringe. You know, you might think it's cringe to like not know everything on a subject and stuff, but that level of cringe is fine. Do you know what I mean? There's like an acceptable level of cringe.
But you're
and
cringe,
You need to
so-
not be afraid of that.
It's
Exactly.
it's not even limited to like US like Asian satellite states or like POC states. The Australian government experienced a coup in 1975 because they were sort of moving away from US hegemony. You know?
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy
Like
shit.
a lot of people would find that ridiculous, but it's part and parcel of American foreign policy.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like, it's so like all over the world. It's just like anyone takes a step away from America, and it's like, oh, there's a coup. Like that's so weird.
Well, that's
A
that's
coup.
kind of like what
Yeah.
happened. That's kind of what happened with. We touched on this earlier. In the UK, we were sort of like very, very, union focused and stuff. Wait, I'm not sure if we did talk about this. I think I might be remembering a Sean video that I watched earlier today. But yeah, so the UK used to be very sort of like labor focused and union focused and shit like that back in the 70s after the war and stuff. And then, Margaret Thatcher came in and just fucking battered the unions, just absolutely trashed them and stuff. And it's like, this stuff happens all the time. Like, it wasn't necessarily like a coup in the UK, but it was certainly like an arm of the neoliberal agenda to like destroy the unions and stuff in the UK. So yeah, it happens very, very regularly, actually, even within countries now known to be in the imperial core.
Yeah, I mean, look at
So yeah,
even though I'm not saying this is a coup, but sometimes I'll describe it as a coup just because I'm feeling inflammatory. But the way that the America treated Bernie Sanders, specifically the Democratic Party, I don't think Bernie Sanders is an anti-imperialist. I don't think that even remotely. But I think he does represent the start of an awakening of the working class in building solidarity with each other instead of relying on an external source like the state to provide it for them. Even though he is an elected official and that's very much dependent upon the state. I'm very aware of this. But the fact that he was a grassroots run candidate who actually inspired people to he was radical in, if you agree to nothing else, he was radical in the manner in which he brought people together and got them thinking, hey, maybe if we just stuck to with each other, us workers, we could actually accomplish something, just the workers. And that alone, I think, the other things he proposed, but I think that was probably the biggest threat to the establishment. So it doesn't have to, that I would say America is absolutely part of the imperial core. So I think, like I said, I don't think he's an anti-imperialist, but you see similar shades of this where anytime anyone's trying to step away from that narrative, the narrative of imperial core oppresses the imperial periphery, and America always has to approve of everything, everyone's business. And if they don't approve, then it's going to be a bad time for you. Like, if you start to veer away from that, it seems like, shit comes crashing down on you.
Yeah. Start getting all these like weird, like far right radicals start getting like mysterious donations in your country, and it's like
that's less so a product of like imperial control, and more that following the Second World War, a lot of Nazi sympathizers in Western Europe weren't prosecuted. They were placed in positions of government. A friend noted to me that one of the guys who was part of the Dutch Nazi Party was made chief of police in Amsterdam to hunt communists in the 1950s.
Yeah. That's fucking wild.
There's been a systemic and continuous dismantlement of the labor movement in the West since the 50s.
of our community has taught us and our allies to move in the shadows to remain invisible. And as you will soon find out, you cannot defeat an enemy that you cannot see.